If you have PCOS, you've probably been told an endless stream of what not to do's. And as a PCOS dietitian, you might think that I'm here to confirm why you shouldn't have gluten, why you shouldn't have dairy, and why you should restrict your calories endlessly until you lose weight. Well, I'm here to squash those concerns. Today, we're going to talk about the 5 diet rules that I actually think you shouldn't listen to if you have PCOS. Because most of what you hear on the internet about PCOS and diet is absolute BS. And pause this video, let me know in the comment section below what is the worst diet rule or diet advice that you've heard about PCOS. Let us know below. All right, today I have my handy dandy notes and we're gonna pick the 5 worst things that I've personally heard as a dietitian that are told to women with PCOS that are just absolute garbage advice. All right, the first diet rule or diet suggestion that I've heard that I think is just not really helpful in the long term is the keto diet for PCOS. Now, let me explain because I know this one is gonna either ruffle some feathers or confuse people because a lot of people see initial success from keto. So the reason why you see initial weight loss from keto is really truly coming from water loss. You're not losing rapid amounts of fat, you're losing rapid amounts of water. So what happens when you eat carbs is your body uses some of those initial carbs for immediate energy. That's why you get that boost in like brain power and just physical energy when you eat carbs. However, you don't use every single bit of the carbs. A lot of times we store some of those through glycogen stores. Every little bit of carbohydrate that your body has that's stored carbs holds on a tiny, tiny bit of water. Now, this is not saying it's a negative thing or a bloating thing. I mean, literally, that is what your body is naturally designed to do. So in a healthy state, you're holding on to water if you have some amount of carbohydrates. And this benefit of losing like 3 to 5 pounds initially from keto is short-lived, okay? So you're not gonna continuously lose weight because it is that water weight. You're just gonna lose that initial water weight and then gain it back when you have carbs again. The biggest problem that I have with the keto diet is the sustainability factor. I don't think that an average person can sustain keto for a majority of their life. And when it comes to diets, as a dietitian, I want to look at what's going to be the most sustainable lifestyle factors and diet advice and diet interventions that are going to help my client meet their goals and sustain it for a lifetime. Just imagine too, if all of us had the keto diet as our diet, it would be pretty hard to sustain that environmentally too. I've talked about that before. I have a separate video that goes into detail on why I don't recommend no carbohydrate diets, but in a nutshell, I just don't think they're sustainable for most people, and it just leads to discouragement and feeling like you're a failure for no apparent reason because, again, most people can't sustain keto. The other thing about keto is that for PCOS in particular, you can put yourself at a lot higher risk for high cholesterol, like LDL cholesterol and total cholesterol in particular, and low HDL cholesterol, which is your good cholesterol. So how many times can I say cholesterol? This can be a challenge for anyone that's on keto, but especially PCOS because we are at a predisposition to developing high cholesterol. Just one of them things with PCOS. And just to top it all off, one of the primary challenges I see, at least besides the obvious PCOS symptoms, is the low energy. And I think that when you have low carbohydrates, you're gonna feel the carb cravings even more intensely, and you're also gonna feel that low energy 10 times more intensely in the brain fog, and it's just not worth it. Number 2 on the bad diet advice list is not having any gluten in your diet. Now, if you have celiac disease, of course, I want you to stay away from gluten because that is something that's going to be inflammatory to you and or something that you're actually allergic to. So ignore this one if you actually have an allergy to gluten. that's totally different. However, if you've been told that gluten is just this horrible thing, gluten is something that we find in whole grain foods and whole grain flours, stuff like that, that's not necessarily true. Of course, if you have a diet really high in processed foods and excessively high in gluten, then potentially that can cause more inflammation from your body, arguably not just from the gluten itself, but from the highly processed foods. But the thing that I worry about the most with no gluten diets when you don't actually need them is that it takes away a lot of essential vitamins and minerals, like B vitamins in particular, that we find naturally in whole grain foods like whole grain bread or whole grain pasta. Having this as a staple in our diet is really what helps our diet stay well-rounded. And so when we strip that away, what normally comes in gluten-free foods is going to be like white rice or white rice flour, stuff like that. And that's not going to be quite as high in nutrients as the same version in whole grain form. Obviously, there's some nuance to this. There are some gluten-free products that probably have vitamins and minerals fortified back into them, which is a positive thing. But from what I have seen from a lot of the gluten-free breads, it really is just kind of like eating something, like, I don't want to say like eating air, but it's like eating something that's really doesn't have a whole lot of nutrition to it. Just carbohydrates and not a lot of vitamins and minerals, and not a lot of fiber, which is another thing that I worry about with going gluten-free. You're losing out on where most people get a majority of their fiber from. If you're enjoying this video so far, then I think you'll definitely want to check out my PCOS supplement guide that I have in the link in the description. I'll leave it at the very top and in the pinned comment so you can check it out. It's gonna help you break down what are the best supplements for PCOS and how to know if a supplement is high quality and one that you should pick. There's a lot of nuance to supplements and which ones are quality versus crap. So I definitely want you to check that one out if you have any questions on PCOS nutrition and supplements. You'll also be put on my waitlist for my PCOS Academy program, which if you're on this waitlist, you'll be the first to get the pre-launch discount. So I highly recommend getting on that list if you want to improve fatigue, carb cravings, and regular periods with diet-free PCOS management. Now back into the video. The last issue with this gluten-free recommendation is just that there's no real research to back it. People talk about gluten-free for PCOS as if it's just this thing that is the epitome of truth, when there are literally zero research articles for gluten-free for PCOS. So unless I start to see more up-and-coming research on this topic that says that even women without celiac with PCOS would benefit from it, I'm not going to be recommending it in my own nutrition recommendations. Number 3 is no dairy. This is another one of those things that people tout around the internet like it's solid fact and like it's backed by so much research when really it's not. Now, I have seen some research on low-fat dairy and no-fat dairy being negative on the effects of testosterone made in our bodies. So in other words, women that have, I think in particular it was the fat-free dairy more often, are more likely to elevate testosterone. This was a small study that I saw. I'll try to pull it up in the description, but that was one of the potential issues that I found. However, I have seen a lot of studies out there that show that high fat or like the higher fat dairies, like, so not the low fat, anything above that is actually beneficial for PCOS because it helps improve ovulation and thus fertility. So I think dairy can be a really positive thing as long as it's had in, moderation. So 1 to 3 servings a day, and you're having that higher fat version. Again, we don't really know why that is. Maybe it's better on blood sugar because it has a little bit higher of fat, and that thus helps with testosterone and insulin resistance. We don't quite know for sure the reason why, but the higher fat dairy is good. So if you need a reason to have the 2% or the full fat milk or yogurt, I've been including it a lot more in my smoothies and different things like that. And I've actually noticed that I feel a lot fuller on less. So it's been a positive for me. I'm interested to hear if you've tried it out too. Number 4, the next bad piece of diet advice that I hear all the time is restrict, restrict, restrict your calories. A lot of times people come to me or come to other dietitians from the doctors saying that they just need to lose weight. And oftentimes those recommendations equate to a 1,200, 1,400 calorie diet, which is just not enough calories for the average person. When you overly restrict calories, I usually recommend no more than 250 calorie of a deficit in actual calories. So for example, if your needs are 2,000, something like 1,750 or 1,800 is going to be what range I would say would be the smartest for a calorie deficit. Any more than that, when your calorie needs are typically much closer to 2,000, is going to slow down your metabolism in the long term and make it even more challenging to fight that insulin resistance that we develop with PCOS. You're already at a disadvantage with insulin resistance, so the best thing that we can do is actually get those calories up and closer to your actual energy needs. And again, have that small and slow and steady deficit instead. I know people don't typically like that recommendation because it does take a little bit longer to achieve the weight loss that you want, but my argument really is you're not doing your body a whole lot of favors in the long term by extreme calorie deficits. So why not? It also just makes your hunger and energy levels 10 times worse, just like the keto diet. So I find, especially with PCOS already having that as a prevalent issue, it's just not helpful for the continuation of that like restrict binge cycle. I think it just perpetuates it more, unfortunately. And finally, number 5, the diet recommendation that I see most often for PCOS, or one of them, is intermittent fasting. So this one actually does have some studies, at least for insulin resistance. So I'm not gonna knock on it too hard because I think it can work for some. But I find that the people that it works the best for are the people that already naturally kind of lean towards this style of eating and their circadian rhythm kind of feels like it benefits off of this naturally without someone telling them that they should be on this diet. You know what I mean? So I have seen some folks who don't eat until about 11 o'clock and they feel amazing all day long. They don't have cravings later on in the day and they just eat naturally. That's the kind of person that would be okay on an intermittent fasting style of diet. But I'd still want you to eat at least from, like a range of like 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. You want to give yourself enough of a range with this that you're not feeling like you're just restricting your calories for no reason and stopping at a time that doesn't make sense. I don't know how to put this into words. What I mean is, if it's just an arbitrary number that you're following, I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense. Like, I've had folks that do like a 5K in the morning, or they do a half marathon in the morning, and then they're like, but I can't eat until 11, and that's gonna hinder my progress. But why? Like, why can't you eat until 11? Just because of that rule? You obviously pointed out intuitively that your body probably needs some fuel before that time, and yet you're being told that you can't because of some rule. That's why I don't like intermittent fasting in particular, but I think it can work for some people. In the PCOS literature, what we have found is that it's better to do skipping breakfast than it is to end your meals too early in the day, if that makes sense. And I think that's just because of our natural rhythms of eating. And a lot of times the second one is harder to stick to if you're trying to stop eating by 5 p.m. That's a lot harder to do for the average person and sustain long term than it is to just skip breakfast, because again, some people do that naturally. Let me know in the comment section below what's the worst advice you've ever heard about PCOS, and what's some of this that maybe you have a different take on, that you have a little nuance that you want to add to the community. I'd love to hear from you in the comment section below, and let me know what questions and things you want me to cover in a future PCOS video. I'll leave a video here on the screen that you can click over to if you want to continue hanging out with me today. And thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye, guys.